Okay, good morning and welcome to our Intro to Logic Pro X tutorial for Ableton users. Let's go ahead and get started. So we've already started a new project from the empty project template, and Logic is asking us to add a track. Now, if you're an Ableton user, you're used to already having 4 tracks when you first start up, unless you've changed your default settings. Usually those 2 tracks are 2 MIDI tracks and 2 audio tracks. Well, with Logic, we have 0 tracks to start with, and we just need to choose which type of track we want to add. So a software instrument track is the same thing as a MIDI track in Ableton. Audio tracks are the same thing as audio tracks in Ableton. A guitar or bass track is just an audio track that's kind of specialized for adding guitar effects and amplifiers and that sort of stuff. And then the drummer track is a unique track to Logic, which we'll talk about a little bit later. For now, we're going to start with a software instrument track. And if we twirl down the details here, we'll see that we have a couple more options to pick from. We can choose the instrument. Now, these instruments here are sort of similar to if we go over into our browser here in Ableton. Now, I'm working on Ableton Live 10 intro version, so if you've got like Ableton Suite or whatever, you're going to have some more stuff here. But these right here are our instruments in Ableton. We've got the Impulse, the Instrument Rack, and the Simpler. And then inside of them are kind of specific configurations of those instruments. So it's the same sort of thing in Logic, where these are our actual plugins, our instrument plugins. Some of them are synthesizers. We've got a couple different samplers. And then we have specialized instruments like the studio horns, studio strings, vintage clav, all that kind of stuff. For now, we're not going to get into those details. We're going to actually start with an empty channel strip, which basically means there's a track there with no instrument on it, which is pretty much the same thing that happens in Ableton when you just start with a MIDI track. So we'll go ahead and click Create. And so here is our empty channel strip right here, and you'll see that there's essentially nothing on it right now. Over here on the left is our library. Right along here is going to be all of our tracks. This area right here is what's called the track header. This is where it gives us all of the information about a particular track. All of the music, so all of the notes and the audio data and all that's going to sit over here. Right now we don't have any. And then I'm also going to be, from time to time, bringing up our notepad, which you can open up by clicking this guy right here, or I'll be using the key command, Command Option P. And this is just going to kind of show us all the stuff we want to try to make sure we cover as quickly as possible. So let's go over to our library over here, which I like to call the yibrary, because the key command is Y. So if I just press Y, I can open and close that yibrary. Sorry, that's dorky, I know. And inside of our library, we are looking at a channel strip library. So you see this little triangle right here? That's going to be real important, because I have a library for my channel strip settings, and then I'll also have a library for my instrument, which will pop up in a moment. So let's just go down to piano, and we're going to pick the Bosendorfer Grand Piano. And if I bring up my keyboard real quick, we'll see. All right, so there is our grand piano. By the way, I'm hitting Command K to bring up that little typing keyboard. So if you don't have a connected MIDI keyboard, you can always, kind of play on this. You can change your octave and all that kind of stuff. All right, let's go away. Here we go. Now, I like to set up a specific instrument to be my default software instrument track. So the way to do that is, let's assume that the Bosendorfer Grand Piano is what we want. Go down here to the gear icon and then say define as default. And then so from now on, when I go to add a MIDI track or a software instrument track, push the little plus button here. Or if you want to learn that key command, Command Option N, I usually just use the plus button. And then when we go to instrument, if I choose default patch, again, I'm in software instrument, default patch, then I will from now on always get the Bosendorfer Grand Piano. And that's just my personal preference. I always tend to want to start with a piano sound and then kind of build off from there. All right, so let's check our list here. And so we know how to add a MIDI software instrument track. We know how to open and close the library and choose an instrument patch. Let's go back into there for a second and just look a little bit here. So we got all these different categories, and you'll notice that this Bosendorfer grand piano here is the name of my patch. And when I chose that, a whole bunch of other stuff got brought into my channel strip here as well. Now, for some reason, you're not seeing this channel strip right now. This whole area is actually called the inspector, which you can open and close by typing I for inspector. So this is our channel strip for the track, and then this is our master channel strip. So this is kind of like the channel strip for the track in Ableton, and then all of that sound eventually goes over here to the master track over here. And so on our track channel strip here, you'll notice that we have an instrument here called the EXS24. That's one of the samplers inside of Logic. And all these plugins, these little blue symbols here, can all be turned on or off by pressing the little power button right there on the left side of the button. On the right side of the button, if you click and hold, you can change the instrument or whatever thing you're in. And then if you click in the center of the plugin, it will open up the plugin itself. And so this is the sampler where we can detail our sound however we want. Now, we're not going to get into the details of that for now, but just know that that's where it's at. Now, if I pick a different instrument, for example, if I go into, let's go into bass, or actually better yet, let's go into synthesizers. And let's just pick a bass synth of some sort. How about colossal synth bass? That sounds great. You'll notice that now a lot of that stuff went away, and we're left with just the alchemy instrument. Again, we can turn on and off right here, or we can click in the center and open up, and then you'll see now we have a totally different instrument here. This is our alchemy, which is a probably 5-hour tutorial all in and of itself, which we won't be getting into right now. So let's go back to our Bosendorfer grand piano here. And you notice I've got two different tracks going on here. So you'll see how this area changes when I click to a different track. Same idea in Ableton, right? When you are on one track, you get the information for that track. If I click to a different track, you see what's happening on that track. Let's go back over here. All right, so further down the channel strip here, we've got all of our audio effects or audio plugins. Those are the same idea as if I go into Ableton and go to audio effects or plugins, if you've got plugins as well. And if I take a chorus and put it on the track, so there's my chorus right there. In Logic, it's this area right here. So you'll see for this particular patch that we pulled up, we've got a channel EQ. Again, click in the center of the plugin, and that will open it up. And if you are coming from Ableton Intro, which unfortunately only has for EQ only has that sad little EQ3, which I don't like this. I don't like it. But over here we've got a full-fledged parametric EQ with multi-bands and all kinds of stuff, which we're not going to get into now. But just know that it's a whole heck of a lot easier to work with because you have a little bit more visual feedback in what you're doing. And you'll notice that that little shape that I just made in the EQ now shows up in this window right here. Oh, this is so cool. So if I go here and let's say we want to put a some kind of crazy, low shelf bass boost, and then we look at the picture and it updates right there. All right, so then we have all of our other plugins. We can reorder these plugins just like in Ableton. So if I click and drag this guy over here, now it gets processed in a different order. Works the same way in Logic. If I click and drag this EQ down to here, now it goes through the compressor, then the delay, and then the channel EQ. We can add plugins by just finding an empty slot, whether that slot is clearly visible like this, where I click and here's my list of plugins. So if I want to add, say, I don't know, an expander or limiter or whatever, let's just go with, why not another compressor? And generally when you do that, it's going to open up the plugin for you where you can adjust all the settings. We're not going to get into that right now. We're going to try to move along a little more quickly, but you can also see if I hover in between plugins, you can also click and add a plugin in between those plugins, and that will add a bit crusher because, yeah, relax. There we go. And that would just kind of shift everybody accordingly. Down here are our buses, our sends. That's the same thing in Ableton as these guys right here. So if I send to the A return track, which is always defaults to the reverb track. It's the same thing as using bus 1 here to send to, and you notice if I click on that, we see our bus 1 track over here, which has a space designer reverb and EQ and that kind of stuff. Let's see here. Moving further on down the channel strip, we're going to skip this kind of stuff for now. We've got our pan control. So if I move all the way to the left, sound comes out from the left ear or the right ear or in the center. In Logic, if you double click on a parameter, you can type in the actual number that you want. Or if you option click on something, it will reset it to its default or center value. Further on down, we've got our volume fader. This is how we change the volume of the track. Again, if I option click on this, hold option click, it goes back to its default 0 position. And then all the way at the bottom is our mute and solo controls. Generally, I don't actually click these buttons. Usually what I do is type M for mute or S for solo, and you can toggle those on and off by pressing S a couple times, right? One of the nice things with Logic is that you can multiple solo. Let me get a bunch of tracks here. I'll just Command D. Get a whole bunch of tracks. You can easily solo several tracks all at once, just by default. In Ableton, if you solo a track, I click and solo a different track, it gets rid of that solo, and so you have to like hold Command to get multiple tracks to solo. It's a little bit easier, I think, in Logic, and you see the big S up on the top here. Now that I've got multiple tracks soloed, if I click the big S, all those solos go away. All right, and then finally at the very, very bottom here is our track name. Actually, it's our channel strip name, technically. So if I double click on that, I can change it to whatever I want it to be. Piano 1, and then maybe this guy. And I can do the same thing here by double clicking on the name. Call this guy Piano 2, and then we'll call this guy guitar. No, that doesn't make sense. We'll call this Piano 3. Okay, great. To delete a track, let's say we don't want these guys, which we don't right now. You just simply select them and press the delete key. You can shift select multiple tracks if you want to get rid of multiple tracks. But let's just get back to this for now. All right, so let's look at our list, see how we're doing here. So we need to open and close the inspector. All right, we saw that. That was, remember, we'll do that for you. Open an instrument and adjust the settings. We did that. Open an audio effect. We're good. Adjust the volume fader and the pan. We've got all that. Turn a plugin on and off. We saw that. Change a plugin from the drop-down menu. We saw that. Let me just show it one more time here. You go over to the plugin on the right side of the plugin. Click on, and here's all of our options for our different plugin instruments. Add an audio plugin, move an audio plugin, open the EQ, and then adjust stereo output. So remember we said that all of these tracks eventually go to the stereo output. So this here is the kind of master volume for the stereo output. Now I will point out that Logic has kind of this interesting thing where there's a stereo output and then also a master volume control. And they're two different things, and if you ever come across it, it can be a little bit confusing, but for our sake, we're going to just kind of skip over that for now because you probably won't run into it right away. All right, moving right along, we've got our LCD display up here, which gives us information about our project. I almost never work in this default setting right here, which is called the Beats and Project view, which you notice I just clicked on the little triangle-ish guy there, whatever that symbol's called. And I almost always work in the custom LCD. And then I even further customize it from there, which in fact, we can customize this whole area across the top here. So if I just find an empty gray space area and hold Control and click, or if you've got a right click on your mouse, you can do that. And then say Customize Control Bar and Display. And then I can pick and choose what stuff I want to see up there. So for example, if I want the Replace Mode button to be there, there it is. If I want to have Auto Punch available, I can do that and do as many of these as I want. And we'll just keep readjusting stuff to fit it in there. The custom LCD display I can also customize. That's pretty awesome. So if I want to say also see the locator position, I can see those. If I want to see Verispeed, which we won't get into that, although it's an awesome feature. So we can customize that as well. This is what I tend to work with for my stuff. If you get it all set up and you want to set that as your default, you just simply click on Save as Default. All right, okay, that looks good. Let's see here. How about setting the tempo? So if I press play right now, let's turn on our metronome. That's this little guy right here. Or what I pretty much always use is the key command is K for click, and press play. So we're moving at 120 BPM. We can adjust this tempo by just clicking and dragging it up and down, or better yet, if you double click in there, you can just enter whatever tempo you want, just like in Ableton, clicking and dragging up and down over here, or clicking in there and typing in your own tempo. Okay, we're moving on. Set the tempo, turn on or off the metronome. Remember that was K for click. Use the transport controls and keyboard shortcuts. All right, so pretty much in every DAW, pressing the space bar will start your playback, and space bar again will stop it. Same exact thing in Ableton. We've got several other transport controls up here. If we want to move forward and backward by one measure, we can do that. Or what I use is the key commands. That's the comma key and the period key, or the greater than and less than signs. That is a way quicker way of doing this, moving back and forth by one measure, start and stop, and then record. We'll get to that a little bit later. This little guy right here you may not have if you haven't done my kind of pre-configurations, but to get this capture recording feature, you just control click like we did before, customize the control bar display, and then choose the capture recording. It's an awesome little feature, which we'll hopefully touch on later on. Let's see, let's keep moving here. Start, stop, move forward and backward. We did that. All right, so hopefully I haven't lost you yet, and it's finally time to maybe start making some actual music here. So in Ableton, a lot of times the way we work is we create a clip by just double clicking in there, and then we kind of manually add notes in, something like this. I don't know, whatever that is, okay? And then you click the clip to play it, right? So first of all, but before I go too much further, let me just point out that this view that we're looking at right now, this thing here, doesn't exist in Logic. This idea of a session mode doesn't really exist in Logic. What does exist, if I press tab and we get into the arrangement view, this is this. Get rid of that so you can see it. So in Logic, there only is the arrangement view. But we can still add clips. They're just called regions in Logic. So if I control click or right click and choose create an empty region, or the other way to do that is to use the pencil tool, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Create an empty region, and you'll see we've got what looks kind of like a clip. Now I can resize that by hovering on the bottom right edge. So the bottom right, it's real key that you are on the bottom as opposed to the top. See how the cursor changes? So on the bottom right, I can click and drag that open. And now I have a 4-measure clip. If I hover on the top right edge, now you see I've got the loop cursor. So if I click and drag that, I'm now looping it. And I will say I love the look of Logic so much better. It's so clear where the initial region is and then where the looped regions are. And it's so clear to be able to tell where the entire full clip length or the full region length is, right? You know how in Ableton, like when you drag these guys out, it's like really hard to tell unless you look real closely and you can see those little tiny little things. So so much easier in Logic. So now that I've got my clip, or again in Logic we call them regions, if I double click on it, I will get my piano roll editor. So we can, just like in Ableton, hover over that area and just click and drag this window up to be a little bit bigger. And this should look very familiar. It's the same darn thing as this. And unfortunately, you know how in Ableton we can just like double click and we get a note, right? You can double click to your heart's delight over here and you will never get a note until you hold the command key, and then see how we get a little pencil tool there. And then now I can, wow, that's so loud. Let's turn that down. Oh, you know what? That's bizarre. I forgot I put all this junk on over here. Let's turn some of those guys off. Oh, that sounds a little bit more like a piano. All right, cool. So back to business. We hold the command key to add a note. Just like in Ableton, if you hover over the right edge, you can resize the length of that note. If you click in the center of the note, you can, oops, sorry, move it up or down in pitch. You can move it left or right. Sometimes, there we go. Now, one thing I'll also point out, in Ableton, it's really nice and easy to, if I've got my note, if it's selected, I just push the up and down arrow keys and we move it, you know. This confuses a lot of people, because if I do that in Logic and I got my note selected and I press up or down, oh my gosh, what happened? Where did it go? So up and down arrows will move you up and down through the tracks, which is obnoxious. So to do the moving with your arrow keys, you got to hold the Option key. So I got my note selected, hold Option, and now I can use my arrows to move it up and down. So let's just put a simple little chord progression in here real quick. So let's go. We've got A, and then, oh, that's not A, that's, there we go, there's A. And then notice I'm holding Option and I'm clicking and dragging just like in Ableton. There we go. Oh, you gotta always remember to hold that Option key down. And stuff's lagging a little bit for me, sorry. There we go. There we go. All right. For adjusting octaves, so if I want to take this whole thing up an octave, you know how in Ableton you got your notes selected, you hold Shift in the up and down arrows. It's the same thing, but remember you got to hold that Option key when you want to move something. So we got all our notes selected, Option, Shift, up or down. Space bar to play. And let's say I want this just to be a 2-measure clip. I can go up here, shorten it up. Remember, I'm on the bottom right edge there, bottom right edge. Okay, now I got my 2-measure clip, and let's just let's duplicate that. Oops, that's not what I want to do. Command R is how you repeat something internally. So let's just put this guy. How about that? And let's see if that sounds like. I don't like that because we've got B natural. Let's put it. There we go. All right, so this is a great time to mention, if I want to quickly get back to the beginning of my track, I simply press the return or the enter key, and there I am back at the beginning. And remember, you can use those greater than, less than signs to move forward and backwards by 1 measure. Let's move back down into our editor area down here. So this is the piano roll editor, which, by the way, I can hide and show by pressing the E key. E for editor, or if you specifically want the piano roll as opposed to the score editor or any of these other editors, the P key is our key command to bring up the piano roll. Let's talk about a couple other things down here. So in Ableton, if I want to adjust the velocity of a note, I simply hold Command and click and drag up and down. And that's a brilliant way of doing things. I love that about Ableton. In Logic, it's not quite as quick and easy. You can kind of get to that easiness, but you got to do a couple things first. So let me show you a couple ways to adjust velocity. First of all, you click on a note, and you'll see over here in the menu over here, we've got velocity, which we can adjust up and down. And you'll notice that in Logic, by default, the color changes as well, which is actually really nice. And you also see there's a velocity bar right there too. If we wanted to be able to see the note names, as long as I'm thinking about this, show you that. Go up to View, choose Note Labels, right? So just like in Ableton, we could see the name of the note. So there's our E3. And that number right there is our velocity. So that's kind of helpful to be able to see as well. So as I move this up, you see that number changes, right? All right. The second way to adjust velocity is to just change our cursor tool. And this is a really nice feature of Logic. So you see I've got these 2 menus here. And I've got those same 2 menus for when I'm working up in the tracks area up here. If I just click on this guy here, you'll see I got a list of different tools. I pretty much never click on this. Instead, I press T for tools, and there's my list. And then I can get my velocity tool by clicking on it there. But the way quicker way to do that is just type T for tool, V for velocity, and then now see how my cursor changes. And now it will work like the Ableton tool, where if I click and drag up or down, it's adjusting my velocity. Okay, now that changed my main left click tool. So I'm going to press T again, and then T one more time to get back to my pointer tool. So that's just T is the quick way to get back to your pointer. But then we've got this other set of tools here, which is for our command click. So if I want to switch that to my velocity tool, and then now I've got my normal pointer for moving stuff around or whatever, but then if I hold command, now I've got velocity control. So that's kind of useful as well. And then if I want to get this back to my normal pencil tool, just click up there and change it. All right, so we are looking pretty good here. We've got adding notes with the pencil tool, adjusting length and position. We adjusted velocity. Avoid the pitfalls of key focus, working in the wrong window. Oh yeah, so that's just, you know, every once in a while you'll accidentally, you'll be like pressing a button or something, and you're like, why is it not changing down here? You see this little blue rim, this little blue thing that goes around. That's showing you your key focus. So if I press a key command up here, for example, just shorten this down so you can see it. If I do Command R while I'm in the key focus up here, it will repeat something that's up in here. Whereas if I click down here and type Command R, you see how my key focus is now down here, the little blue ring around there, and I type Command R and it's not doing anything, right? That's because I'm now working in this window. So I've got to have something selected down here for Command R to work. All right, so just kind of be aware of that. All right, we're getting pretty close here. Let's go ahead and move into a little bit of recording, and then we'll look at drummer track, and then we'll be done, I think. So recording is so super simple. Simply put your playhead where you want to start recording, which you notice you can either click and drag that playhead, or you can hover inside of the grid underneath the numbers, not in the numbers, but down here, and just click, and that will move your playhead to wherever you want. Or remember, the quick way to get back to measure 1 is simply press the return enter key. And now we're back at measure 1. And I've got my synth bass track selected, so I'm gonna record something in with that. Remember, I can type Command K to bring up my typing keyboard, or more realistically, you'll probably be playing on your attached MIDI keyboard. And let's just get a, oh wow, that's a lot. Whatever. All right. So I'll make sure my metronome is on, which remember you can turn that on or off by typing K. And then I've also got my count in set. This is just like in Ableton, where we go over to our metronome here and you see how the count in is set to 1 bar. So same thing in Logic. I can turn that on or off. And if I click and hold it, I can change how many measures it gives me to count in. So what that means is when I start recording, it will give me 4 beats before it actually starts recording. So I'll go ahead and to start recording, I could go up here and click and do it the slow way, or the way better way is just type R for record. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hit spacebar to stop your recording, and you're all done. Let's point out a couple more things, as long as I'm thinking about it. So in Ableton, we can quantize notes. You can do the same thing in Logic. I can either select all my notes or type Command A to select them all. Notice the blue rim, right? So if I hit Command A down here, it will select all those notes. If I'm up here and type Command A, it will select all of the regions, not what I want. Go back in here, click down here, then type Command A. And then my quantize settings are over here on the left under Time Quantize. And I can choose what type of note I'm quantizing to. So I'll go to 8th notes and then press Q. Now, if you've already got this set up correctly, you can also just select your notes and press Q is the key command for quantizing. And then our strength right here is just kind of like how much it quantizes. That's the same thing. Works the same way in Ableton. You know, when you Command Shift U, your amount here is the same thing as strength. All right, so we got our quantization going. A couple other quick workflow tips. We have a cycle or a loop feature in Logic as well. That's up here. If I just kind of click on that area, you can also set it by clicking and dragging up there. Or the way better way, the way super quick way, is select the region or regions that you want to be looping. So like, let's say, let me shorten this guy down. There we go. Let's say I wanted kind of this whole area looped here. So if I select all those regions, notice I just clicked and dragged to select them all. And then just type the U key, and that sets your cycle for that area. So if I want to reset it to be this length, just select it and press U. So much quicker. And I don't like how that kind of hangs on too long. Now you notice when we popped back there, we didn't hear that first note. In Logic, or I'm sorry, in Ableton 10, they add this brilliant feature where if you start playing in the middle of a MIDI note, so if I press play right here, let me just solo this bass track. If I press play right now, we don't hear that bass note. In Ableton, they fixed this by default where it will always play a MIDI note even if you're not at the beginning of the note. It's like in Logic, I have to go actually to before this note happens in order to get it to play, which I can't really do like that. I have to do that. And then now it'll play, right? And the reason it's not playing right now is it's just a little bit early, so I technically need to quantize this a little bit better. But I do want to show you real quickly, the quick fix to that is go up to File, Project Settings. This is a project setting, not a preference. Go to MIDI and go to Chase and then click Notes. And then now if I press play right in the middle here, I still get that note, which is really, really pretty helpful. All right, so we did a little bit of recording. I showed you the cycle. By the way, to turn this cycle on or off, take a guess. It's C for cycle. Yeah, that's really great. Press R for recording, E to get rid of my editor. Let's see, I think we've got maybe one more thing to point out here, one or two things. We also have a mixer in Logic, just like, it's kind of similar to, let's go back over here in Ableton. You know, when you're looking here, like this is kind of like the mixer view, even it's the session view, yeah, but it's your mixer as well. Same thing in Logic. If I press X to bring up the mixer, now I can see all my channel strips all at once and work on them together. And finally, I gotta show you this before we go, which is the drummer track. So I'll go up to track and say new track, or I can go just straight to new drummer track, or I can use this guy here, the little plus key, and we'll choose drummer for drummer track. Say create. And oh my gosh, if you've never experienced drummer before, it is amazing. It's like a professional drummer. Actually, it's like 20 professional drummers all in a little box, ready to work for you. So here's my drummer region. You notice it looks sort of like an audio region. It's not quite an audio region. This is really just data that's playing this plugin. But without doing a thing, if I just simply hit play. Oh my gosh, it's good drums, like no, I didn't even have to do anything. You can go down here and adjust lots of settings. We need a whole nother tutorial on the drummer track and how to work with it, but you can kind of play around with it, choose what instruments you want. You can do some different presets over here. We can even change, we can even change let's go out of the way here. No, oh, you know what? Slight detour real quick. Sometimes these little guys get in the way. These are your region and track inspectors. They just show you data about whatever region you have selected or whatever track you're on, but that's how you get those to be out of your way. Sometimes you can't see everything you need to see. Anyways, back to this guy here. We can go to our beat presets. Bring up my library by pressing Y, remember our library. And then we can pick different drummers over here, so we can actually switch out of hip hop and say go to electronic. And let's say we want Jasper's dubstep to play on our track. And then now. I mean, it's amazing. We can make multiple different regions here. So if I make that smaller, Command R, now I got 2 different regions with different settings. He'll automatically put a fill in between them. Oh, it's just great. All right, so that is kind of the end of the tutorial. I hope that's enough to kind of get you started. Feel free to start having some fun, and we'll be back with some more next time. Have fun.